And now for the last 30 minutes we will have a plenary session. Could I ask the speakers to please join us on the stage? And of course Jakob also. While they are moving on the stage, a personal reflection. It's a paradox on the topic on innovation. 3 of the speakers have been referring to their great-grandfathers. And you should expect that people who are really into innovation would be more innovative than doing more or less exactly the same thing as their great-grandparents. But we are not going to follow up on that one. So, Jakob, would you take over?
Yeah, sure, I can. I think we have a very luxurious situation now, having been 2 chairs here. So, but yeah, just let me shortly say that also about the second part. I, especially as a non-fishery specialist, but having some experience in totally different industry, I'm deeply impressed actually to see how this what I called sustainability in a very theoretical way this morning actually is really implemented and taking shape in recovering what was earlier waste, in turning byproducts into main products, in making processes more efficient and more suitable and more, so to say, product friendly in many ways. Yeah, I think that has been a really short but kind of for me very impressive panopticon of what can be done. We have only 20 minutes left, so instead of just chairing the session in asking questions, so to say, from our point of view, we propose that we go directly to giving the floor to the audience and ask you what types of questions have occurred. So please feel free to take the microphones. Who is making the start?
And could you please, when you start, tell who you are and which company you represent?
Thank you. My name is Guus Pastoor. I represent the European Processes Association. And I'd like to refer to the superchilling process. I think it's a very interesting concept which is bringing a lot of quality into the market and indeed is reducing a lot of weight we're transporting, water we're transporting, things like that. But now you can often see that legislation is lagging behind innovation. And I think that's a theme which will probably occur for many of our things we're trying to develop in innovation. What we see now in Europe, for example, is that if you have the superchilling process, the legislation only refers to the temperature of melting ice. And there is no temperature of melting ice which is exactly defined. So at the moment, and that's just a reflection, but maybe you can comment that, at the moment we have some problems in Europe because the legislation doesn't define temperature of melting ice, which means that some veterinarians, they check the super chilled fish and they say, hey, I detect ice crystals. So this must have been frozen, so it's defrosted. And then you get into a whole big chunk of problems. But anyway, could you comment on how you can see how legislation is maybe hindering sometimes our innovation? This is just one example. And are there ways to get past that?
Yes, it's true in that case that there is no definition of melting ice temperature. And I think in superchilling the problem is that we have now been telling everybody for last 20 years that you have to add fish into ice, you have to add ice, and then now we are saying that you don't have to add ice, take it away. So this is of course a challenge that not only to the consumer and end user side is that the legislation has to be followed in a proper way, and the main the whole principle is that we are not selling a frozen fish. We are selling a super cooled fish which is under 0 degrees, and it doesn't contain any frozen. It doesn't. No, the ice cells are in fact frozen, but not so much that it's not damaging. It has no impact on the fish. So in my opinion, because the temperature of near ice melting temperature is so vast, like principle, I think it's more better to get some kind of definition of what is super chilled and what is the goal for that. Was there something else then?
So if I could add, my experience from the UK seafood market is that they, in retail, you see fresh seafood, refreshed seafood, and fish never frozen. So this will be the fourth category then. Any other questions?
Yes, my question is for Ingrid. My name is Jean Lanteng, and I'm from la Fédération Régionale Acadienne des Pêcheurs Professionnels. We're based in Chipaga in New Brunswick, Canada. And we are involved into shrimp and crab fishery. My question is regarding this water studies. Did you study the recovery cost? Because there are tons and tons of water to be taken. How is it economically feasible? Did you have a look at that?
Yeah, thank you very much. In the PIPE project, we ended it actually with a cost-benefit analysis done by a student here in Iceland at the University of Iceland. And we looked at different scenarios based on the size. This was based actually on using ultrafiltration because that's where we had the most data. And we took into consideration also reduction of tax costs and different sizes of the ultrafiltration equipment. And we saw, as I mentioned briefly, that the primary herring producer that had really large amounts of seafood processed water, we actually could see a benefit using ultrafiltration technology. But for the smaller secondary herring producer who had more limited amounts, even if their brines were very thick and rich, there was no benefit. And the shrimp, we haven't done that calculation yet. But it is, I think it's the same with solid byproducts like guts and skins and so on. You need a certain volume to sort of get payback from the investment of the equipment. And transporting water is, of course, something you don't do. This is at least what I have heard. But it would be interesting to look upon clusters of companies that are in close proximity to each other and perhaps see if they could jointly, if you could put some equipment more or less centrally located and take care of water from several companies. So I think, you need a certain volume. And perhaps also, as I mentioned in my last slide, I think you should start with something quite cheap, something more simplistic like sedimentation or flotation. And often many companies also have flotation tanks in place, but they use perhaps non-food grade flocculants. So instead of taking the huge jump from doing nothing up to very, very sophisticated techniques, I think that can be difficult. You need to also secure, of course, that there is a market for the end product. And that's something we are starting to look into, but it's a new biomass and there are several things we need to know about it, maybe before it's a clear market. So I hope I answered your question, but I think the volume indeed is crucial.
Thank you. Any more questions from the audience?
Hi, my name is Bjarni Hammer. I'm from the Faroese Parliament, and I have a question for Thomas at Kotland, which I think was very interesting. The question is, how much amount of raw material do you need to, as you're working now, to get a profit? And I'm thinking about how big is this investment you are working on? And the last question is, how do you get the raw materials? Do you use vertical integration, or do you buy it direct from the trawler, from the fisheries?
Basically, what we are doing is to make the platform for the industry to join forces So if I look into the, for example, the collagen product, we are building the factory from scratch and the technology. We are getting the know-how from Spain, where we're working with a Spanish company. But at the same time, we are working with 4 of the biggest fishing companies in Iceland, and they're working together. So they have the raw material, which is the backbone for maybe the half of what we need into the factory, and the rest. Then we have the stable funding to invest in the project. That's the collaboration we need, and you always need that to start it, and then we start going into the market, and then we need more raw material, and then we start buying from the other companies. And probably when we get to a market like this, we can pay higher prices for the fish skin, but at the same time we will make demands how the fish skins need to be done and how it's delivered to us. Hopefully this answers your question.
Good. Any more questions? In that case, I have a few questions. Let me start with Min. Being in the seafood industry myself in Norway, we were wondering for years, how could it be that the Icelandic were able to produce salted codfish in a wider way than the Norwegian industry was? We thought in the late 90s, beginning of the century, that the Icelandics used a different kind of salt. We understand now that there has been used a different technique, but could you tell us about the process? How did you go about to share information between the countries, between the industries in different countries on different techniques? How did you collaborate in this project?
Yeah, actually, when I was doing my PhD, I must work about the bacalhau processing. At the beginning, we are trying to see how effect of different bright concentration on the. At the beginning, we thought that is the salt when we diffuse into the fish muscle, we damage protein, and we are trying to see how the effect of different salt concentration on protein denaturation during processing, and we are trying to reduce the different bright concentration during processing, and we see that is no much different between the different concentration. And then we are trying, after that, we are thinking different way that to see how to produce the bacalhau with try to remain the white color of the cod. And after that, we are thinking that it's like based on some previous research, like one of my supervisors, she used polyphosphate, and to see how to affect polyphosphate in the gene of the product, the final products. And as I show in my presentation, that we didn't see any effect of added phosphate in processing into the gene of the product. And then we are trying, okay, we take a look on that to see how effect of added phosphate into the color. And after that, we found that it's okay. We added phosphate inside the fish muscle during processing of bacalhau. It can enhance. It can retain the white color of the product. But I mentioned in my presentation that the 3-step processing of bacalhau in Iceland, that is not come up from my study. That come up from previous study, from previous research, and from previous research in the bacalhau industry in Iceland. I just follow that to see how effect of different mixture of added phosphate inside the fish muscle in processing on the quality of the final products. And based on our research, and we are trying to get a sample from Norway, from Denmark, and also from Faroe Island to see how different phosphate people are using by using the technique of ion chromatography to see different type of phosphate inside the fish muscle. And based on our result from the checking the added phosphate, and from the beginning and to the end, and actually at the time it's my professor Sigurd Andersen. He attended the owner meeting in Belgium, and to find with people from Portugal, because you know the Portuguese people, they don't allow to use added phosphate inside the fish, the bacalhau, because traditionally they want to eat the bacalhau with a little bit yellow color and with a little bit rancidity that comes up from the lipid oxidation. But it's luckily that is finally the European Commission, they allow to use that one. That is something we have done in our research in the Matis, based on the sponsor from UNDP, and also at the time when I was working on Matis also.
Thank you, and for sure it's important to respect the Portuguese consumers. They eat, after all, 25% of the total catch of Atlantic cod globally. They are big consumers, more than 10 kilo per capita. Moving on to Matti, you showed that super chill could be an interesting and valuable technique for salmon. Is this a technique also applicable for the whitefish industry?
Yes, it is indeed. It's actually in Iceland there is trawlers here which are already using the super chilled cooling method, and it has been. I don't know exactly what to say about it, but I know that it's in use, and for whitefish it has been the first to come, and actually salmon is now the second one, which we are implementing this, and it is so that maybe he knows better how they are handling there in the trawlers in Iceland. So I might give him the microphone view.
I'm not really into the super chilling, but I know they're using it in fisk, in Söderkrókur, in Malmö, the trawler there. They changed it a lot, and so definitely it's used in the fish, whitefish industry also.
Mm. Do you have any questions?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah, just a question to Tumi, returning again to capacity building, maybe looked at it from a bit the different ends of the spectrum, where you said that many of the people coming to the courses are coming from environments where there is very low capacity and people are generalists. And I'm sure that they are going home with a lot, just as individuals, equipped with a lot of knowledge and capabilities. To what extent did you see during the last 20 years that this led also a change in the structure or an improvement in the structure actually to which the people returned?
Yeah, I think what we have emphasized in our program is we've gone from sort of what you can call technology transfer to more research-oriented program. And when we started, most fellows had a BSc degree. They were a bit older also. We were coming in at a time when the World Bank was going through having economic structural adjustment programs all over the developing countries, and there were no recruitment of people, so we were dealing with a fairly old population of professionals. And these days we tend to get people that are much, they have more formal education, and they're also, with the IT revolution, they're much more aware of the global situation. They may not have traveled much more, but they certainly have all got their smartphones and they know what's going on. So you have to change, knowing that their background and experience have radically changed.
I think we are about to close. This is the last chance for the audience to address a question. That doesn't.
If there are none, may I ask another one, which is maybe a very stupid one to Thomas. When you talked to us about the so to say the different slices going to different countries, do I have to imagine that this is a kind of a process where you work on contracts which maybe go for a year, which gives stability in this process, or is this a kind of a daily change in needs that are communicated to you?
I think you're more looking into longer contracts, and it's part of the FIS. But you can see when it's moving faster and faster, you're getting more grip of the technology. You can, since we are trying to have each boat in the harbor each morning, and the fish is going by noon by a plane. So when you leave Iceland, you will take fish with you in the planes, and hopefully eat it at your restaurant in the evening. But I think it will always change more faster and faster. And sometime you can order something in the morning and get it in the night, hopefully.
Thank you. Yeah.
We have learned so much from the poultry industry and the beef industry how to chop up an animal, and by doing so and not selling the whole fillet as one piece, that we are able to make much more money on the total fillet. By this, Jakob is going to hand over some tokens of appreciations. Yes. I would like to say before we end that this event has been organized together with the Nordic Working Group on Fisheries. That is a group under the Nordic Council of Ministers. Now we have sent over the honor to those who deserve it.
Okay. Yeah. We have been very harsh managers, actually, just keeping the gifts back in order to make the process very quick and efficient. So now it's your turn. Yeah, thank you.
Look, thank you. Thank you. Selv takk.